Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Miha and welcome to my Chess Realm YouTube channel. German Team League or Schach Bundesliga recently ended. There were several teams competing, each consisting of 8 players. There were also lots of prominent grandmaster playing, so this was definitely one of the strongest league in the world. And I found a very interesting game from the 15th round between Jonas Bjerre and Jes-Uwe Maiwald. In the game, Jonas Bjerre had white pieces and he started with e4, g6, d4, bishop to g7, knight to c3, d6, and this opening is classified as modern defense. So white played bishop to e3 pretty much according to the theory. And now black plays a6, a4, black develops knight to his natural square on f6, white also to f3, black castles kingside and knight queen to d2, preparing to strike with bishop on h6 later, advancing with h-pawn with action on the king side, so this cannot go unanswered. So black plays bishop to g4, attacking knight on f3. White doesn't want to get doubled pawn, so bishop to e2. And now black captures knight on f3, bishop recaptures, and now knight to c6, attacking this pawn on d4. Bishop has to protect it, so white plays d5, attacking the knight. Knight goes to d5, again attacking bishop on f3. White wants to preserve his bishop pair, so bishop goes to e2, and now black plays b5. Now this pawn on b5 is attacked multiple times. Let's see if white can grab it. If a captures, then black attacks rook on a1. But even if white captures on a8, queen recaptures. Let's see. Black is attacking pawn on e4, knight is protecting, so I can only capture with bishop, but then after rook to b8, when this bishop is removed, black is attacking pawn on b2, so it's not like black doesn't get any counterplay for a sacrifice pawn. Okay, so in the game white plays f3, protecting this pawn on e4, and now black plays b4, attacking the knight. Knight goes to d1, and now a5, further protecting pawn on b4. And now c3, double attack on the pawn on b4, but black plays c6, counter attack on the pawn on d5. Well, if white captures, then black simply recaptures on d5, and here white would have to play b captures on a5, and then later support it with the b pawn, because if here white captures on d5, then a pawn captures on b4. If queen recaptures, then knight to d5, attacking the queen. After queen to d2, then knight captures on d3. After knight recaptures, then we have knight to c6, attacking pawn on b2. Well, if white castles, then it's queen to b6, further increasing pressure. Also pinning this knight together with bishop. This is very unpleasant position for white. So in the game, white captures on c6, knight recaptures. Now pawn on b4 is protected 2 times, so bishop goes to c6, trying to remove this defender of a pawn on b4. So black captures on c3, knight recaptures, and now knight can go to b4. And now white finally castles king side. And here black has decided to open the game, so d5 was played, threatening with d4, forking both pieces. Here maybe the best option for white would be simply e5, later with f4 supporting the pawn, limiting the mobility of black's dark square bishop. But in the game, white captures on d5, and now knight recaptures. Well, white has to be careful. If white makes a random move, then knight captures on e3. After queen recaptures, then it's bishop to d4. d4, gaining a queen. If, however, white removes the king out of the pin, there's still knight to e3. After queen recaptures, again knight to c2, forking both pieces. So here white has no other options but to capture knight on d5. After queen recaptures, again offering exchange of queens. Well, if white captures on d5, then knight captures, attacking bishop on e3, also attacking pawn on b2. So here white would have to defend it with bishop to c8, but even with a bishop pair here, white is in defensive position. So in the game, white keeps the tension. Rook from a to d1 was played, and now queen goes to b3, attacking pawn on b2. White responds with bishop to c5, attacking pawn on e7. Well, of course, black cannot move it because then black loses exchange. So black defends with bishop to f6, and now rook from f goes to e1, further increasing pressure on the pawn on e7. Well, black cannot simply capture on b2. Then we have rook to e3, attacking the queen. Queen has to protect the bishop. After queen to e2, then maybe bishop to d7, protecting these two squares, and later with bishop to e7. Well, this is definitely better position for white. Maybe black would try with rook from f to d8, attacking the queen. Well, if white removes the queen, yeah, now black can play e6, still endangering this pawn on b2. But here actually white could try with queen to d8 after rook captures, then rook captures for queen. Black, sorry, white has two rooks. King is now in check and can only go to g7, after that bishop to f7. Well, black would have to be careful. If queen captures on b2, then bishop to f8 check, king to g8, bishop to h6 check. Even if bishop captures, then rook to e8 checkmate. So here black would have to capture bishop on e7 after rook recaptures. Now queen can capture pawn on b2 after rook from last rank go to d7. White is going to grab this pawn on e7, but here black has a chance to save the draw. Queen to c1, king to g2, queen to c5, king can escape to g3, but queen to g5, king to c2, queen to c5, and we have perpetual check. Rook to d3 doesn't help because here rook is pinned. All black needs to do is place knight on c2. Okay, but let's go back to our game. In the game, black plays rook from f goes to c8, attacking bishop on c5, and now bishop captures on e7, bishop recaptures, rook to e7, and now rook to c2, attacking queen. So white takes over the 7th rank, and black takes over the 2nd rank, and queen goes to f4. Now this pawn on f7 is pretty much under pressure. All white needs to do is to place a bishop to c4, further increasing the pressure. Well, luckily for black, black is controlling this square so far. But in the game, black plays rook to f8, further supporting this pawn on f7. And now it plays rook from e goes to d7. Sort of a waiting move, waiting to see black's next move. Well, maybe the best option would be knight to c6. Okay, so white can trade, of course, but then white loses initiative. And if white makes a random move, then now black can capture on b2, because after bishop to c4, now we have knight to e5. Knight on e5 is protected, and also protecting pawn on f7 and attacking the rook. In the game, however, black makes a fatal blunder. Queen to b2 was played, yeah, threatening with rook to g2, but white doesn't care. Bishop to c4 was played. Of course, if black captures on g2, then king to h1, and you can see this pawn on h2 is protected, so there's nothing much black can do after rook to f2. Now white can capture on f7, threatening with checkmate. If rook captures, queen to f7, king to h8, and queen to g8 checkmate. So in the game, black plays king to h8, removing his king from a direct attack, but that doesn't help. Rook to f7 was played anyway. Now rook to g2 check, king to h1, and now rook captures on f7. Of course, white cannot capture with queen because This is not checked, the rook goes to h2, king to g1, and queen to g2 checkmate. So in the game, white plays rook to d8 check. If rook goes to f8, then it's queen to f8 checkmate. So king goes to g7, and now we have mate in 3. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to find it. Mate in 3 starts with rook to g8 check. King cannot go to h6 because it's protected. So king can only capture on g8, then we have queen to f7 check, king to g8, and queen to g8 checkmate. And realizing this, in this position, Jens Uwe Maywald resigned the game. So I hope you like this game and that you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.